Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight. I'm Judith Krober, and today Wayne Bush is back. And we are going to talk about a little bit about from Archaeons to Archons, from parasites to paradise. His website is Tricked by the Light. He's a regular here on Night Flight, and I'm very happy to have him back. So welcome
Thank
back.
you, Judith. I really appreciate you having me back on the show.
We both had some health issues.
Yeah,
we finally made it.
I was having respiratory issues. You wanted to have me on, and I was just having difficulty breathing and speaking strongly, and it was almost like a precursor for this coronavirus in a way. I mean, obviously I don't have it, but it was kind of strange. And I wrote the article like a couple of weeks before the big news hit, about coronavirus, and then like just a few days ago, the movie Parasite wins Best Picture of the Year. So it's amazing how these parallels seem to work in Hollywood and the big picture of the year, and like I remember back when it was like Armageddon, and they were talking, it always seems to be a parallel between the movies and what's in the news.
Yeah, and it truly is. I just had an interview with Gary Wayne about Netflix Messiah.
Yeah, I saw like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 episodes of that show. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it gets better and better from episode
I may
to
have
episode.
to stick with it and watch it through,
Don't
see it
drop the
through.
ball.
Oh, no. I just got so many other shows I've been watching, just
So
trying to keep up
before
with
we
it.
jump into our subject, a couple of weeks ago, I had Lauda Leon as a guest. Do you know her? Do you know?
Oh yeah, she's great. We've talked on Zoom before and emailed.
And
She's
I'm
great.
mentioning this because in our last interview, we talked a lot about the void.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think she's been there before.
no.
No.
And
Okay.
here's why. She had a near-death experience. She was drowning, but there was a group of dolphins who came and they tossed her back to the beach and made a lot of noise as if they were, look here, something is wrong. And then people came and they revived her. So obviously she is alive. And then I asked her, I said, because she said everything was dark. And I said, do you think you were in the void? And she said, no, the void is still a part of this inverted universe. If you are in the void, you still are not out of the matrix. She said, where I went was the deep.
Okay.
I'm not saying this to tell you you have it all wrong.
No.
Because I know that your work is a work in progress. Yeah, new information comes in and it changes, of course. So maybe you want to contact her. I don't know, but I found that friends. Very interesting.
Yeah, when we talked, she did use the phrase "the deep," and I guess I kind of assumed she was talking about the void later when I was writing my article. But I noticed the same thing. It's like all these cases of people who had been to the void. I mean, obviously they came back, and so they did not escape the matrix either. Because a lot of them didn't say, "Well, I chose to come back." I mean, I know there were 1 or 2 that were kind of brought back, one way or another, and so. Yeah, I've struggled with that too. I mean, whether or not what people say is the void, whether that's the only thing that makes me think it might be outside the matrix is a lot of them. And then there may be some that were in different types of voids or different types of places, because some of them actually mentioned it being non-duality. It's outside of space and time, beyond space and time, beyond thought, beyond emotion. It's like a neutrality, and they say it's neither light nor dark, or both light or dark. It's kind of a clear. Well, some people describe it as dark, but others describe it as clear. So that's the only thing that makes me think it might be a good option outside, because they do say it's beyond time and space and non-duality. So
maybe some of them were in a different place but didn't have the word for it.
exactly, and yeah, the very fact that they were describing it as dark, from what I've been thinking, it's more of a clear place. It shouldn't be neither, dark and light is part of the duality. So, if you're in the light, you're still in the duality. If you're in darkness, that's part of the duality also. So, yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah. So now I have a question.
None of us really know. I mean, that's what I kind of want to preface everything with, is like, I don't have all the answers, and I don't pretend to, and I don't think anybody does for sure, because, none of us have died for good and stayed there. So we're all in the matrix right now. So just how can anybody say how to get out if you're still in it?
Yeah, exactly. And if you came back, your memory has been wiped. For the most
99% of the time. There are a few that are, I know I read this one NDE recently where the guy he's had 3 NDEs, and the first 2, they wiped his memory. Like he remembers thinking, oh, I know all this knowledge and I can't wait to go back and share it with everybody. And then when he gets back, he can't remember anything. He said the third time he was there, he said he told him the only way he was going to go back is if he got to keep his memory. And then he was kind of surprised when he came to that. It's like, oh yes, they let me keep my memory, So yeah, but yeah, 99.9% of the time, yeah, the memory is definitely wiped, which to me is a major red flag. I mean, now I kind of operate under the assumption that we have the ability to use our intention to manifest reality. But then you have all these reports of people that said they were forced to come back. They didn't want to come back to Earth, but they were forced to come back against their will. And so if you have somebody who's making you do something against your will, to me, that's a major red flag. Like here on Earth, if you do something against somebody's will, we call it, theft or rape or murder, and it's a major crime, So I don't know why they get a free pass for that.
So tell us a little bit about your article, what it's about in general, and then I have my first question.
Okay. Well, I was hoping I went through the article and highlighted a bunch of important parts of each section, and I was hoping maybe I could go through it. It would maybe take like 45 minutes or so, but feel free to interrupt at any time and ask questions, clarify, because nobody wants to hear me talk for 45 minutes straight. But let me, I guess, share my screen here first, right? That might help. Okay. Share. Here we go. Can you see the article now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I entitled it "As the Conqueror Worm Turns from Archaeon to Archon, from Parasites to Paradise." And you look up at the top, these first images. That one on the left is an image of the demiurge, which from Gnostic thought is the false god creator. And the second one, I think, is from a DMT experience where it kind of looks like a worm. And then the 2 on the right I noticed that fractals kind of have these worm-like appendages too. So like I said, I published the article a couple weeks before the coronavirus the news first came. And the article is mainly about how life feeds upon life, and it's the so-called circle of life. And it's where creatures age and die and are born again and again, the food chain. So I kind of thought that, I made the observation that maybe we come from worm to sperm, and then at death, we go back again to worms. And I was thinking, can viruses and parasites hack into our nervous system via the spine and send signals to the brain, like feed me more sugar? And I definitely think that's the case. And what better way to infiltrate and influence us than living undetected inside our bodies as microscopic microbes? They've managed with stealth to be invisible to the naked eye for millennia. So, here on Earth, we have these predator-prey relationships, and there's host-parasite relations too. And like I mentioned, the Gnostics called the chief archon a delusional false god of the world, a sort of mind and energy parasite. And that's what got me, kind of thinking about writing this article, was because of this demiurge was sometimes described as a worm. He was depicted as a serpent with the head of a lion, and sometimes as a worm. So, some scientists believe we actually crawled out of the ocean and evolved from wriggling worm-like sea creatures, and that we evolved from a worm-like sperm in our mother's womb to eventually become humans. And when we die, our bodies are devoured by the worms, and then we travel through a wormhole or a tunnel, towards this loving white light, as some say. And then in mythology, we have the Ouroboros, which is a serpent or worm that devours its own tail in a circle, which might be a symbol of eternity or reincarnation, the cyclical nature of reality.
So now I have a question.
Sure.
Can you scroll
Back up?
down up a little bit where we left? Here. Stop.
Okay.
So I can honestly say the biggest enemy I face is boredom. And boredom is when everything in your life seems boring. Well, what is it that bores? You guessed it, worms. Please elaborate a little bit. I don't get it.
Well, worms burrow or bore into the earth, right? And it's just a play on words. Is where do all these words that we use come from? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, honestly, one of the biggest things I think all of us face. I mean, I'm retired now, so maybe it's a little different for me. But now that I've got all this time on my hands, if I'm not working on articles and my research, I get really, really, really bored. And it just struck me as, wow, bored. No wonder they use the word boring or boredom.
Yeah, and I don't have that.
No, you're lucky,
honestly
then.
not, because I can endure myself.
I think that's. Oh, go ahead.
I can be with my thoughts all by myself, no problem. I never feel bored. I don't know that feeling.
Well, my mind is always racing and wandering, and I'm always wanting more and more new information. But I honestly think that's one of the reasons we choose to come down here to Earth, is because we're these infinite, eternal spirits that are always craving new experiences. Like we want to have fun or be entertained or have adventure, go on these stories. And so I think we're always looking for the newest and latest experience to have, and I guess in a sense you could call that boredom,
double fries with that one, please.
yeah. So one of the reasons I wrote the article was because I was getting some emails, and you mentioned before we came on about oregano, and I was searching through my emails for oregano for some reason, and I came across this email that this woman wrote me like 4 years ago, where she was talking about the parasites, and I'll get to that like later when I go over the emails that I received. But and then I got one from another woman who was talking about the parasites, and it's such an unsavory topic. It's like, I think when I first got that first email about the parasites, it's like, oh, I don't want to think about that. I'm more interested in the spiritual and than what's going on at the physical level. But I had mentioned to Mark Gray, we were going to do a panel discussion with Lotta Leon and Eve Lorgan and myself. And I said, hey, what if we talk a little bit about this parasite that this emailer had mentioned to me? It might be an interesting topic. And so we were going to do that. And then like 3 days later, my dad died, and the whole thing totally got derailed. And I don't know how much of an effect they can have on that kind of stuff, but it's just amazing that just got totally derailed out of nowhere. And then Mark sent me putting me in touch with another researcher who was researching the parasites and worms also. So I said, you know what, that's 3. I really need to write an article on this. I think there's really something to it that at least deserves exploring. So that's kind of a background on how I got into it.
Yeah. So another thing, you talk about the struggle for energy.
Yeah,
that we play with each other. And that is a concept that is not only in the Matrix. Do you know the Prophecies of Celestine.
Oh yeah, of course. I had that
Yes,
book. That's a really
and
good book.
that is a
James
huge,
Redfield, right?
yeah, and that is a huge chapter as well.
Yes, you're
Astrology
right.
and
He talks about
energy.
the people, all these energy exchanges. Anytime you're in contact with a person, there's a lot of times where somebody is vamping the energy from the other person, and a person gets drained. Yeah, I noticed that Celestine prophecy was a big one of the major prophecies in that was 8 or 9 insights, I guess it was.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good observation there. That's very true.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh no, I was when I was doing the article, I thought about cymatics. I knew that cymatics were it's really from the Greek that means matters pertaining to waves. And I knew it was about waveforms coming into physicality. And so I thought, well, I'll just take a quick look through that book, right? And so, the book's talking about the nature of waveforms, and especially sine waves. To me, they look very serpentine. They got that, and then the whole thing's about movement, and vibration, and wave patterns. And then I thought, well, worms react to movement and vibration, especially sound vibration. And then lo and behold, I look at this photo from the book, and it looks very worm-like. And in the book, he's talking about things are in a continual state of constant vibration, oscillation, undulation, and pulsation. And I'd been theorizing that when we come from the void, for lack of a better word, and where things are still and silent, and there's no motion. But when you start to have motion, that's what creates the separation and the space and the time. And so to me, it might be that the first wave that came out of the void, I guess you could maybe have looked like a worm. and in the book, there's a few references to the worms too. So I thought that was very interesting.
So what do you mean when you talk about dream police?
The Dream Police. It's just a reference to a song by the Cheap Trick, where they talk about the Dream Police. They're coming to you, and you're so like when you sleep at night. The Dream Police are there, and maybe they're affecting our dreams. And that's one of the ways. I mean, we spend 1/3 of our life. Basically unconscious. We're dreaming. And, one time I woke up and I distinctly heard the message, go to the light. I mean, I woke up and somebody was telling me, go to the light, and I just kind of felt, you know, I don't know. It just seems like that dreams are a really effective way for them to manipulate our thoughts, or maybe even they kind of give us a download at night and kind of reset things. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Dark City. That's a really good one that kind of touches on that subject too.
Yeah. So now Archaeons are real entities.
Yeah. So when I was when I was doing the research for the article, I came across this term Archaeon, which sounds so much like Archon. And, the plural form is the Archaea. But I found out that Archaea was actually one of the 3 different types of life forms. And there's an article that talks about it a little bit later. But they were microscopic, and they look a little bit like a jellyfish, and they're able to live without oxygen.
Yeah,
and so I was
in a very acidic
yes.
environment, and it can also be very hot, and as you said, deprived of oxygen,
Sulfuric, who
water.
knows?
Yeah, these buggers, they
Yes.
they can endure a lot.
And just sort of as an aside, I've for a long time been thinking about the word argon and how close it is to archon, because the G and the C are they came from each other. And so I knew that argon is one of the 3 most prevalent gases in our atmosphere that we breathe in, but it's only like 1% of it, right? So it's the fabled 1% again, that comes up. And it's just an archon's used in arc welding and artificial lighting too. So I just found that really interesting. It may or may not pertain to anything, but I kind of just wanted to throw it out there in case anybody else could make any sense out of it. So when I started researching, I was watching some shows about how life began on Earth and where it came from. And so I was watching some of these BBC documentaries, and one was with David Attenborough called First Life. And they were saying how life first came out of the seas and eventually would have become us, and that well,
Do you
they did
believe
eventually
that?
become us. Yeah, I do. I mean, at some level, there seems to be a lot of evidence for that, but who knows?
I don't.
It's just an interesting. You don't? Okay.
No.
Well, I'm just saying
But it
scientists are
doesn't
saying that.
matter. We can. It has a very materialistic approach, and but we can talk about that a little bit later on. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's some evidence. A lot of we share like 70% of the genes and all that with these worms. But yeah, so they were saying the basic body plan of almost all the animals that are alive today. They had heads and tails and segmented bodies, and they were talking about the ancestor, the very first creature that went on to land. And he was saying it looks at first sight like a worm, but of course no worm has legs. But he says it's halfway between a worm and an insect. And then he said velvet worms may have been the first animal to set foot on land. And he said the first creature to have the sign of a backbone, and probably the ancestor of us all, is a tiny worm-like creature called Pikaia, I guess. And he said the ancestor of all vertebrates. From such a creature as this, the first fish evolved. Some of them living in swamps started to gulp air and wriggled up onto the land, gave rise to moist-skinned amphibians, and then went on to become reptiles, and from them came the birds and then the mammals. He said life originated in the oceans, and after an immense period of time, some creatures managed to crawl up onto the land. And he said all of us alive today owe our very existence to them.
So when they say we share 70% of our genome with a slimy worm,
yeah, and an acorn worm.
Why should I believe that?
I don't know.
They also tell us that
I'm not saying anybody should or shouldn't believe any of this stuff. I'm just saying, I'm just finding articles to say stuff. I'm trying to make a connection between worms. Like I said, I'm not a scientist, so I don't pretend to know what the truth is here. And maybe the article is complete BS. I don't know. It's just I'm putting it out there. People can take from it what they want. If you don't agree with it, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. So here, the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, they wrote that worm genomes reveal a link between humans and distant relatives. And then here's evolution from worms. Here's where it says you share 70% of your genes with this slimy marine worm. It's from Live Science, and it says over 500 million years ago, humans and certain worms shared a common ancestor, and people still share thousands of genes with the worms. 70% of human genes trace ancestry to the acorn worm. This is worm genomes reveal the link. An independent article called Humanity Evolved from Wriggling Sea Creatures with Large Mouth and No Anus says humankind evolved from a bag-like sea creature that had a large mouth, apparently had no anus, and moved by wriggling. A Discover magazine article said called "Did Parasites Drive Human Evolution?" It says humans evolved from a 5-centimeter long worm-like creature that wriggled in the sea more than 500 million years ago. Another article says clearly acorn worms look nothing like people. The worms have no limbs and breathe through slits in their guts, but they share approximately 14,000 genes with humans, comprising 70% of the human genome. So then I found another BBC documentary called Secret Universe, The Hidden Life of the Cell. So they were talking a lot about cells and viruses, and they were saying viruses are actually more like zombies in that they are not alive. They are the undead, and they are hacking the cell in order to take control of it, spread the infection throughout the body, and take it over. Every one of us is made of 120 trillion cells. And powering all the activity are the cell's power stations inside these free-floating structures called mitochondria. And everything in this world works to a master plan, and the plan is protected deep in the heart of every cell. And the nucleus contains the instruction manual for life, the DNA. And each gene holds instructions. The double helix contains over 20,000 instructions. So, I started thinking about, the DNA containing this life manual, all these instructions, these codes. And I was thinking, what if that's like our blueprint for the life? When we come down here and we've got this life plan, these contracts we've made, what if all the instructions of what we're going to do are, maybe it's in our junk DNA that people, 98% of it, they don't even know what it's used for. But it says our cells
So
are under
when,
constant.
excuse me,
Sure.
when they say these archaeons and viruses, they behave like zombies, do they mean that they are not really alive in the sense that?
Well, they said, yeah, then they're not alive, but once they enter the cell, they look like they're alive. They behave like they're alive, but they're not technically alive. But they need to replicate. You know, that's the way they kind of I don't know, increase in numbers. That's the way they don't technically grow, but that's how they can grow is through replication. They enter the cell and then take it over. And so they say our cells are under constant attack, and every day our bodies are constantly bombarded by these invisible critters, bacteria and viruses. And the viruses can take control of the cell and reproduce 10,000 times over. And as the viruses approach the cell, they're met by a cloud of resistance, our antibodies. And these white blood cells feed on alien invaders like that. And these antibodies and white blood cells form the front line of our immune system. So you got this fight going on between the immune system and these, viral invaders. They call it a cat and mouse game in the battle between cells and viruses. And it says it goes right back to the origins of life on Earth. It says the virus, and it's no longer obviously alive. They don't look alive, yet they behave perhaps as if they are. They behave with a sense of purpose. A virus isn't strictly alive. It can't make more of itself on its own. It can only replicate if it uses parts that it hijacks from a cell. So this unending war, a struggle between viruses and ourselves and evolution, but they say it's co-evolution and both sides have to change. He said we're all descended from a single prehistoric ancestor, a cell containing a single strand of DNA that started it all. But the virus is as old as we are. It's evolved alongside us, forcing us to adapt, to change or die in a deadly game of cat and mouse. And these viruses continuously force the cells to change. So they said they've also helped shape us. They've made us who we are. And I think that's kind of interesting. You wonder, we take all these, vaccines and everything, but you wonder.
I don't take them.
Oh, I don't either, but people do. And you got to wonder if maybe we're okay. I don't usually take anything. I don't go to the doctor. I've never gotten a shot or any of that kind of stuff. And I don't even take much medicine, but I may start to do that now that I've written this article. But, because at some point, your immune system gets stronger. It's kind of like the adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, because your immune system has to up itself. And if you're constantly taking stuff to knock it out, then maybe your immune system doesn't change. I don't know. It's just a thought. But Richard Dawkins wrote this book, The Selfish Gene, and he says what kind of entity is that survives or does not survive as a consequence of natural selection. He says that unit will become, more or less by definition, selfish. But he said we shouldn't be surprised to find individual organisms behaving altruistically for the good of the genes. Each gene is seen as pursuing its own self-interested agenda against the background of the other genes in the gene pool. And Richard Dawkins, he was the one that coined the term meme in this book. He said, we need a new name for the new replicator, a noun that conveys the idea of a unit of cultural transmission or unit of imitation. He said memes propagate themselves in the meme pool by leaping from brain to brain via a process which in the broad sense can be called imitation. And he says, when you plant a fertile meme in my mind, you literally parasitize my brain, turning it into a vehicle for the meme's propagation. And then he even gives an example of what he calls the God meme, or the idea that God is copied, from culture to culture. But, we have these memes. It's become really big now on Facebook and everywhere else, where people just post all these memes, copying each other. And then he gives examples in nature of cannibalism of female praying mantises and cowardly behavior of emperor penguins, the anglerfish from Finding Nemo that dangles out the light or the little worm to lure in its prey. Just a bunch of different examples. Peter Pan beetles and crabs that are parasitized, and they suck nourishment from the body. Kind of graphic, when you get down to it. But He says the individual seems best regarded as a pawn in the game, to be sacrificed when the greater interest of the species as a whole requires it. A species whose individual members are prepared to sacrifice themselves for the welfare of the group may be less likely to go extinct. And of course, they're constantly pushing, the need to sacrifice this, that, and the other for the greater good of society. He says the simplest way to explain the surplus DNA is to suppose that is a parasite, or at best a harmless but useless passenger hitching a ride in the survival machines created by the other DNA. He says, what is the selfish gene? He said, it's all replicas of a particular bit of DNA distributed throughout the world. And he talks about mitochondria, and he says they're symbiotic bacteria who join forces with our type of cell very early in evolution. He says we're gigantic colonies of symbiotic genes. And he talks about the games in human life and the theory of games and a prisoner's dilemma. And he says bacterial parasites are probably engaged in ceaseless games of prisoner's dilemma with their hosts. A game between human and bacteria. And he sums it up. He says the selfish gene, which he calls the extended phenotype view of life, he says the fundamental unit, the prime mover of all life, is the replicator, where copies are made and they're capable of generating an indefinitely large set of copies of itself. And the world becomes filled with the most powerful and ingenious replicators. He says he wonders if the DNA is probably I'm wondering this, if the DNA is probably the instructions that contain our life script, maybe with certain codons turned on and off, like computer codon, right? But the viruses and worms have DNA too, maybe to override the original instructions. And they're hacking the system and hijacking the code, perhaps. So, if we come down to earth and we're here to play this game, it's like a game of hide and seek with ourselves. If we're these infinite, all-powerful beings, and we just want to forget about that because it becomes, think about it. If you're an infinite being and you can manifest anything you want at any time, it might become a little tedious or a little easy, a little boring, and maybe you do want a challenge. And so you might want to limit yourself and forget about it and kind of play this game of hide and seek with yourself, where you pretend or you forget that you're not really God. And so maybe the part of that game are these Archons or these parasites that are here to provide the resistance, the negative, they're the villains, so to speak, in this drama or conflict in this divine movie that we're playing here.
You know what I found interesting as well, that
What's that?
The jinns and the watchers, they have, the jinn, for instance, has its root in a different word that means serpent or worm. So there we have another connection to
Gene means serpent or worm. Okay. I have to look at. Well, it comes, I'm sure the connection between gene and genie. And so the genie were these, I guess, spirits or whatever. They're the watchers, like you're saying. They're the spirit guides that are, constantly following us around and taking notes and writing down every bad thing we do. So yeah, you're right. There is a connection between gene and genie and the watchers. Yeah, you're right. That didn't dawn on me. I'll have to add that to the article. So, this next section is on the mitochondria, and there's the University of Sydney said that the mitochondria were parasites. They investigated the bacterium Midichlorians mitochondria, named after Star Wars microbes called midichlorians, and they live inside cells and grant the mystical power known as the Force. And it's revealed that the mitochondria may have entered our cells through a parasitic bacterium that used a tail to swim and could survive with almost no oxygen, like we talked about earlier, and then possibly acted as a parasite. It says mitochondria are actually highly reduced bacteria with their own set of DNA that resides in our cells. And then there's speculation that these viruses come from outer space or constantly come down from above, and panspermia. The life, the paper argues, did not originate on planet Earth. Here's another article that says, could giant viruses be the origin of life on Earth?
No.
I don't know. Okay. These are the scientists. Who knows? I don't know. But okay. Why do you say no?
because even if we share, langsam. We also share genes with chimpanzees, for instance. There's
Yeah.
only, I guess, a difference between
98% we share with like chimps
couple
and
of
others
percent.
too.
So,
Yeah.
Yet, so in general, I'm not surprised that.
But the scientists say
life
that we did
forms.
evolve from the chimps too. So I mean that's just one of the steps in the evolutionary link
Yeah,
that
that
they
is what they are telling us.
yeah.
And why
Yeah.
are there still chimps?
I believe it because you look back at the Sumerian texts, and they were talking. That was just the first civilization that we know of that had any records of, and so they, in these records that were written down, they basically said that these Anunnaki, these Anuna gods, they took the primate that was here on Earth and they infused it with their own DNA to create the human being as a worker being for them. To do their hard work and then to give them praise and sacrifices and stuff like that. So, you know, it's not just the scientists that are saying it, also the Sumerian texts are saying it also. So
that we come from
there is that. Huh?
That we come from monkeys?
Basically, they because I remember the one text was it was between Inky and the mother goddess, and she was he was telling her that, hey, you know, the being that you need is already here on Earth, and he was talking about the, you know, the basically the monkey, the ancient hominid there that was already on Earth. So I mean, once again, this is Sumerian text. You can take it or leave it. I mean, doesn't mean it's the truth or anything. But
but we have to keep in mind that Enki, Enlil, the whole shebang, they were first-class deceivers.
Yeah, Enki was a trickster god. That's for sure.
So I'm not too crazy about not in the sense that it's not interesting to know something about these Sumerian texts, but I take it with a huge grain of salt.
But why would they be so upfront and seemingly honest about, hey, we're saying they said they're created us as a slave, but you know, to work for them and to praise them and to get, you know, give them sacrifices and all this stuff. I mean, that's pretty blunt. You know, I mean, I don't know why, you know, why, I don't know, they probably don't care. They're probably just really blazingly blazing about
Probably,
it, you know?
because they thought we would never figure it out.
That could be, but so, you know, the next, you know, you can disagree with this all you want, but I mean, the next article I presented was, could giant viruses be the origin of life on Earth? And from Quantum Magazine, he said the ancestors of modern viruses, far from being evolutionary laggards, might have provided the raw material for the development of cellular life and help drive its diversification into the varied organisms that fill every corner of the planet. And these virus-like elements spurred several of the most important stages in the emergence of life: the evolution of DNA, the formation of the first cells, and life split into three domains: the archaea, bacteria, and eukaryotes. And so the archaea is the plural of the word archaeon. So that's where I got that from. Silence Daily said viruses are a major driver of human evolution. And that this is from the Genetics Society of America. And they said 30% of all protein adaptations since humans' divergence with chimpanzees have been driven by viruses. So, you know, right there, they're saying that we diverged from the chimpanzees. So, you know, I'm not disputing the fact that, you know, hey, we came from worms. You know, I'm not saying, hey, we came from worms, not chimpanzees. I'm just saying could be a progression, or at least that's what scientists are saying. I mean, I don't really know one way or the other, but I wanted to put this information out there, and people can, you know, accept or reject or alter to their own specifications. So then this BBC Horizon episode called "Why Do Viruses Kill?" It makes the point that viruses are driving the evolution of mankind. And it says, while the virus is inside the cell, it can be looked at as a living entity. They have to replicate inside a cell. They can't just grow. The virus takes it over, forcing it to manufacture more virus particles. It wants to spread from cell to cell, and they have the ability to replicate, means there's no escaping viruses. They say it says there's more viruses than there are people on Earth. and that they're one of the dominant life forms in the oceans. Those are the things that are really driving ocean ecosystems. Viruses kill 20% of all the living material in the sea every day. Viruses can be found anywhere. Viruses can survive vacuums. They can survive ultra cold. They're the most abundant life form on Earth. In the 1970s, scientists discovered a third category of life entirely new to science, and they called it Archaea, meaning the ancient ones. And many scientists believe Archaea are the earliest form of life, and they were riddled with viruses. So what we think now as viruses certainly are ancient, that they were here when we were first evolving, and some of them push it even further and speculate that viruses actually preceded cellular life, and viruses have been affecting life from the moment they first emerged. And they're a huge evolutionary driving force, and they've helped determine what has lived and died, and they play such a critical role in the evolution of life. They've come to dominate the world, infiltrating every type of living thing, and they evolved to infect those species which can. The other viruses even evolved to manipulate our very behavior to their own ends. Like the flu forces you to unwittingly pass it on to others, coughing and sneezing and all the other stuff. They've infiltrated every living species, and it says each person walking has a plethora of viruses in them. They have at least 4 viruses, everyone, and they infect each and every one of us, but somehow life continues. And they say the viruses don't really want to kill us. Every virus has to strike an evolutionary balance between being able to replicate successfully and multiplying so much that it destroys its host. They want to be able to replicate without destroying their host. And it doesn't make any sense to kill the home that you need to make more of yourself. And so they say that at the end, they say we're actually here to support the replication of viruses. And everyone's been thinking of this backwards. And I discovered this term called retroviruses, and because I was searching to see if these viruses can actually change the DNA, right? And supposedly these retroviruses can do something along those lines. It says our DNA contains roughly 100,000 pieces of viral DNA. Altogether, they make up about 8% of the human genome. And it says most of our viral DNA comes from one group in particular, retroviruses, which includes HIV. It says a retrovirus invades a host cell and inserts its genes into that cell's DNA, and these viral genes co-opt the cell's machinery. And then as a part of the retroviruses, there's what's called the ARC gene. I just ran across this like a week ago.
Have you ever seen the documentary HIV equals AIDS, Fact or Fraud?
No, I have not. Is it a good one?
Watch it.
Okay.
It's excellent.
Okay, I will. But there's this thing called the ARC gene, and this article says an ancient virus may be responsible for human consciousness.
I have to interject.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
And here is where it really gets, very materialistic. And from what I read, it has a little bit the taste of that our brain produces consciousness, and that is not the case.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I'm just talking about from there's multiple levels to all this. And right now, I mean, in the past, all I've talked about pretty much is spirituality and how awareness and consciousness outside of the body. I mean, I've been talking about that for eons, about how the consciousness is outside the body and the spirit, and that we're just pure awareness. Now I'm going down, I'm zooming into the physical, into a microscopic level, and we're, like they were saying, we're like a hybrid between, like our ego or our animal. We're like fused, and the Gnostic texts talk about this too. We've basically been fused with these animalistic bodies, and that's part of us. We have bacteria in us and viruses and all that. It's like a balance between the two.
I'm not disputing that we have them in it, but that they are the source of our consciousness, no.
No. It didn't say that. It just says it's at the very root of our conscious thought. I mean, it's not saying that our conscious thought is only produced by it. And, and maybe it is. I'm not agreeing with everything that's in these articles. I'm just pointing out that there are some connections between our thinking and what these viruses. I mean, I truly, I'm not saying that the consciousness originated with viruses. I'm saying that they have ability to hijack in, and I'll get through this later in another article, is that these microbial bacteria that's in our gut, it can tap into the vagus nerve and connect to our brain. And in nature, you see all kinds of like these zombies that are being hacked in by parasites, and they make them just do whatever they want them to do. And I think to a certain degree, with some people more than others, some of our behavior is determined by some of that. I mean, especially you look at some of the molds, and there's other articles in here where it talks about these molds are toxic and they can definitely affect your mood and behavior. I'm not asking anybody that they have to believe it, but I mean, I'm just presenting some evidence. Take it or leave it.
It's not a coincidence that they call it the gut brain.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, the article says you've got an ancient virus in your brain. It didn't say your brain is completely an ancient virus. It says you've got an ancient virus in your brain. It says you've got an ancient virus at the very root of your conscious thought. That snippet of code, interesting they call it a snippet of code, is still very alive in humans' brains today. It says in little capsules that look a whole lot like viruses. They might be critical elements of how nerves communicate and reorganize over time, and that takes thoughts to be necessary for higher order thinking. And it says between 40 and 80% of the human genome arrive from some archaic viral invasion. And it says a virus is a genetic parasite. It injects its genetic code into host cells and hijacks them, turning them into its own purposes. It says the viral gene known as ARC writes instructions down as bits of mobile genetic code known as RNA. And it says viruses tend to store their genetic code in RNA rather than DNA. But it says ARC seems to have made the jump from virus to animal more than once.
Can you scroll up a little bit where you started reading at? In fact, you've got an ancient virus at the root of your conscious thought. I have a problem with that simply because where do thoughts come from? We are more.
We don't know. I would say that you don't know either. I don't know. You don't know. I don't think anyone knows for sure. It's speculation.
Yeah, but here it sounds a little bit as if.
Okay, maybe these are scientists. They are materialists. I'm not saying. I don't say I believe every single sentence in this article, and I would tend to agree with you. I mean, it's not the very root of our conscious thought. It's not the only source of our conscious thought. I mean, I certainly don't believe that consciousness comes from the brain only. That's for damn sure, or from parasites for that matter. But,
I mean, I know that if you have a brain damage, for instance, it can change the content of your consciousness.
Right.
Let's say you have.
I will concede that point to you. I will concede the point to you.
Yeah.
I was never saying that the viruses are the root of our consciousness. I'm sorry. I've got like 30 minutes to go through an article and highlight stuff and try to present something for a show, and it gets to be very difficult. And I'm not going to go over every little word in the article before I come on a show. It's difficult, it's difficult. I apologize to everyone for my lack of perfection. Anyway, so this next article says a protein in your brain behaves like a virus, infecting your cells with memories. It says forming a protective shell arc moves from neuron to neuron. And they say the star of Shepard's research is a protein called activity-regulated cytoskeleton protein, or ARC. It says ARC is essential for memory. If you take the ARC gene out of mice, they don't remember anything. ARC proteins behave like viruses, infecting cells just like real viruses do. ARC is really the intermediate between the environment and the wiring of the brain. And he says there are another 50 genes in the genome that have similar viral structure. And, I wonder if it's sort of a coincidence that ARC and Archon are so closely related, etymologically. It's probably a reach or speculation, but it is interesting to me. And then nearly 10% of the human genome is made of bits of virus DNA. And then there's this field called epigenetics, where the epigenetic literally means in addition to changes in genetic sequence, and it includes any process that alters gene activity without changing the DNA sequence. And there's a wide variety of illnesses, behaviors, and other indicators that linking them with cancers and cognitive dysfunction, respiratory, cardiovascular, reproductive, autoimmune, other illnesses. And some of these drivers include heavy metals, pesticides, diesel exhaust, tobacco smoke, hydrocarbons, hormones, viruses, bacteria, and others. So this article by Wired says people are human bacteria hybrid. It says most of the cells in your body are not your own, nor are they even human. They are bacterial. It says we're best viewed as walking superorganisms, highly complex conglomerations of human cells, bacteria, fungi, and viruses. It says humans are made up of more microbes than human cells. And according to a study carried out by more than 200 researchers from 80 universities in a 5-year study headed up by the Human Microbiome Project, they said our bodies are made up of more microbes than human cells. It says humans have 10 times more bacteria than human cells. And how do microbial communities affect human health? And the summary that came up to was the number of bacteria living within the body of the average healthy adult human are estimated to outnumber human cells 10 to 1. Changes in these microbial communities may be responsible for digestive disorders, skin diseases, gum disease, and even obesity. This BBC News article says more than half your body is not human. It says human cells make up only 43% of the body's total cell count. The rest are microscopic colonists. And they talk about diseases ranging from allergy to Parkinson's. And then they says the field is even asking questions of what it means to be human. The Atlantic wrote an article says when gut bacteria change brain function. And it says that microbiomes play a role in regulating how people think and feel. It says gut bacteria affect a person's health, and these microbes influence digestion, allergies, and metabolism. And the bacterial ecosystem regulates how people think and feel, and it could play a crucial role in autism, anxiety, depression, and other disorders.
You know, that makes sense because your gut bacteria has a lot to do with what you take in, your nutrition, your food. And for instance, depressed people, for them, it's very, very important that they have a clean diet. Because if you don't, then of course your gut bacteria will not be the best, and you will probably never get out of that cycle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's funny that we sometimes associate like intuition with, I've got that gut feeling I needed to do this, and why are we, what's in our gut? We have a lot of, I'm not saying that it's necessarily the bacteria or microbiomes that are telling us what to do, but I think there is an influence there to some degree, and greater degree in other people, depending upon their dieting and how well they take care of themselves. This article, Gut Microbe to Brain Signaling, and what happens in vagus. It says the gut microbiota have emerged as a key player in health and disease, and they discuss the vagus nerve, which connects the visceral organs and the brain, as an important communication pathway for the gut microbiota to influence brain and behavior. And then I get a little bit into the etymology of the word worm. And in the English language, worm derives from the Old Norse orm and Anglo-Saxon worm, W-Y-R-M, meaning serpent or dragon.
Yeah, there you have it. And that also pertains to watchers, seraphim, angels.
Yep, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, and then I went on like a week ago. I was on our Wayne... what's his name? Our Wayne Steiger show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Wayne Steiger. And somebody commented in the comments section afterwards. He said, I find it interesting worm comes from serpent and snake. After quitting processed foods, sugar, and chemicals back in 2013 and doing a parasite cleanse, I really started to wonder about the Adam and Eve story. Was the eating of the fruit a way for a parasite to enter our gut and change the way we think? Since cleaning up my gut, it really seems like a portal, a literal wormhole. I don't know, who knows if that's true or not, but it is an interesting thing to think about. In mythology, I think I mentioned this earlier, is the Ouroboros, which is a serpent or worm that devours its own tail and encircles the world. And then, the scientists have said that worms and snakes are unrelated, but it's a little bit controversial. And there's this article here that says the earliest snakes were likely both eel-like swimmers and worm-like burrowers. And then in literature, you've got a lot of references to like the great worm, and Wagner used the legends about Siegfried slaying the dragon in his operas. In the opera Siegfried, the main character fights a dragon. You know, it's the typical story that we got to slay the dragon in the cave and all that stuff. It's found throughout a lot of literature. And then, but in the original German libretto, it's called Worm. And then J.R.R. Tolkien wrote The Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun, and he calls the dragon Scatha a long worm. And then you've got in Paradise Lost, Milton writes, "O Eve, in evil hour thou did give ear to that false worm." And then Dante's Inferno talks about the great worm, Kerberos too. And then in Egyptian mythology, in the book of overthrowing Apep, the enemy of Ra, the enemy of Un-Nefer, which is Osiris, the work contained a series of spells. And the leader in chief of the host of darkness was a fiend called Apep, who appeared in the sky in the form of a monster serpent. And the first spell in the book is an incantation directed against reptiles and noxious creatures. And it took the form of a huge serpent that resembled the intestines. And the incantation said, "Let war be made against thy worms or serpents which are in thee. Keep ward over the worms which are in the earth and water. Get back thee, worm, and draw out thy poison which is in all the members of him." And even in the book of Isaiah, the Bible calls Jacob a worm. It says, "Fear not thou worm Jacob, and you men of Israel." Here, the vermis is actually a word from Latin. And vermis is actually a worm-like structure found in animal brains between the hemispheres of the cerebellum. Vermis means worm in Latin. It's a valve that regulates the alternation between thinking and remembering, controls the flow of spirit between the anterior ventricle and the middle ventricle, and regulates the alternation between fantasy, thinking, memory by contracting and extending. And then in Robert Flood's diagram, a little worm labeled vermis is a microscopic avatar of the great worm of the cosmos and connects these worlds of imagination to the faculties of cognition and judgment. Next, the Discover magazine wrote this article called, I love the title, "Meet the Parasites That Control Human Brains." It says, "Join us as we share tales of some of the creepiest parasites around, those that control the brains of their human hosts, sometimes leaving insanity and death in their wake. These are the tales of neurological parasites." And they talk about Toxoplasma gondii. It can radically alter the behavior of hosts like rats, cats, and yes, even humans. Then N. Fowleri sprouts a sucking apparatus, devouring brain cells as it goes, and its hosts go from uncomfortable to incoherent to unconscious in a matter of hours. And then I love this website. It's called tvtropes.org, and they've got all these tropes throughout all kinds of literature and books and movies and shows, whatnot. But they've got they've identified a trope that they call the worm, and it lists many real life examples of it. And one they call the puppeteer parasite, and they mention toxoplasmosis, as well as horsehair worms, a species of fluke that infects snails. It says fungi residing in the human digestive tract can make their hosts feel very uncomfortable. Unless they eat enough sweets to satisfy the fungi, you can get infected simply by eating infested bread. Or is that infested? Yeah, infested bread. Another trope was the parasite zombie, and they said there's certain parasites and other critters that can take over another critter, making them effectively their own personal zombie. The fungi can make zombies, and there's another one that takes over ants. It makes them climb as high as they can so the fungus can germinate and spread its spores onto more ants. Another fungus called the insect destroyer does the same thing to flies. And then there's fungi like this for most insect species. And it says that mind controls them, a certain one, mind controls them in the jumping into water so the worm can lay its eggs. Another trope, they call the mind virus, and they talk about liver flukes.
Excuse me, the mind virus, is that what others call the vertigo?
Oh, the Wetiko, yeah, it could be. But Paul Lee talks about the Wetiko and the shamans, and how he believes that the humanity has sort of been infected by this mind virus, which he calls Wetiko. I haven't really read the book or delved that deeply into his research, but I think that's probably what he's referring to. This toxoplasmosis, which is a protozoan found in cat feces, and kind of the crazy cat lady that people talk about, may be a part of that. And there's this devil worm. Look at that cute little guy there. An in-depth look at the devil worm. It says Cosmos Magazine did this article, and it says it was named in honor of Mephistopheles, a subterranean demon from the medieval German legend Faust. Then WebMD even had an article on what's eating you. They have all these pictures of parasites, like these bed bugs that can be in your mattresses, and lice that can be in your blood and your head, your body. Scabies, a mite that digs into your body and lays eggs. Tapeworms. You've got even what they call brain-eating amoeba. Mainly people in Southeast Asia, but it lives in fresh and warm fresh water and enters through the nose. And then we've got this mold toxicity, which I referred to a little bit earlier. It's a common cause of psychiatric symptoms. And it says, could your depression, anxiety, and brain fog and insomnia be due to mold toxicity? And there's symptoms exclusively psychiatric, such as depression, anxiety, attentional problems, brain fog, and insomnia. It says it's present. It says it's only present in 25% of the population, but I left that. It's actually present in 25% of the population, who in most cases have a genetic predisposition, which inhibits their clearance of biotoxins. This article, does mold affect your brain? It says that a mold is actually a toxin, and it releases toxic gas and spores into the air. And when the toxin's in your body via skin or air, the toxic gases cause a disturbance in many organs, including your brain, and it can affect cognitive function.
And now add on top of this, the wireless radiation.
Yes.
On top of that, and you have a nice cocktail.
Oh yeah. I actually mentioned that a little bit later. Well, that's in one of the emails. Somebody was mentioning the 5G and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and even some targeted individuals and stuff. But other symptoms, they said psychological distress, exhaustion, muscle weakness, mental fog, breathing problems. This was the article that the title. Zombies are everywhere. Parasites mean you could be one too. So National Geographic had this article, and it says, in the wild, insects, worms, virus, and fungi turn animals into hyper-specialized zombies. Which ones can take over humans? The article seriously points out that zombies are real and nature's teeming with them. Fungi take over the brains of ants, wasps, paralyzed cockroaches, a practice called zombification. Scientists have found that fungi, bacteria, wasps, and worms do it. It says it's extremely widespread across the animal kingdom, and nature is full of examples of creatures that take possession of other creatures. And I had seen this. This is a really good documentary. If people can find it, it's on Nova. It's called Creatures of Light. And they studied bioluminescence and biofluorescent creatures, and they talk about the infamous anglerfish with its luminous lure, and the light-packed viperfish, and there's these glowworms in New Zealand that light up the night sky. I mean, they're in the tops of these caves, so the starry ceiling fools the prey like flies and moths, which are attracted to the light. And so when they fly upwards, they get trapped by the sticky thread-like snares. And then there's other examples like the cuttlefish. But one of the craziest examples of mind control in nature is this worm begins to take over a pill bug's brain and alter the brain's chemistry to make them love light. Instead of hiding under rocks, which is normal behavior for a pill bug, the bug starts to roam around out in the open, and this makes the pill bug easily exposed for a bird to snatch up as food. And once again, the eye finds them and eats them, and the cycle continues again. And I found in Taoism, there's this concept called the three corpses, or the three worms, and it's a belief that demonic creatures live inside the human body, and they seek to hasten the death of their host. and they're located within the head, chest, and abdomen. And they even instituted this practice of abstaining from grains and cereals as the first step towards expelling them. And then this ties into what they call the nine worms, which are the physical counterparts and acting agents for the three corpses. And there's these different nine worms, and one's called the ambush worm that feeds off their essence and blood. Another one lies above and below the heart, consuming their host's blood. The lung worm causes coughing, phlegm buildup, and difficulty in breathing. And the red worm causes stagnation of the blood and pneuma, heaviness in the waist, and ringing in the ears. I got ringing in the ears myself. So then I ran across this article about a week or two ago from, it says no disease, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it says no disease can exist in an alkaline environment. This is Dr. Otto Warburg. He says no disease, including cancer, can exist in an alkaline environment. And Dr. Warburg was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1931. That's a little bit old there, so I don't know how well that stands up now. But he said that cancer cells live in hypoxic, very low oxygen and acidic conditions and derive energy from sugars by fermenting them the way yeast does. He said no disease, including cancer, can exist in an alkaline environment. And as cancer progresses, the body becomes more and more acidic as its pH drops below 7.35. And if you look at most of the foods that people consume, it's full of sugar, preservatives, genetically modified organisms, all which contribute to acidity in the body. And the most alkaline foods are vegetables, as well as some fruits, grains, some nuts, and alkaline water. And I looked into buying pH testing strips, and it says here you can get them from your local drugstore. I went down to my local drugstore. They didn't have them. I ended up buying a box of 100 on Amazon for like $6. But then when I did it, it's a good, you can tell whether your body's alkaline or acidic, but the shades, the subtleties of the shades between the different colors are very hard to ascertain. So I found out there's actually a digital meter that you can buy, and that would give you the exact number. So looking to getting that. But I included here a pH color chart of the different foods and what's considered alkaline, what's considered acidic.
Yeah, but it makes it scroll up a little bit.
Sure.
Wait,
Higher than this
okay,
chart.
Okay. Yeah. No, where did I see that? Fried foods, chocolate, cheese, tea, beef, artificial sugars. Yeah.
All the things we love.
Yeah, actually, no, not really.
I love sugar. Give me chocolate cake and brownies, and I love all that stuff. But I've come to not eat it because I just know it's not good for me.
Buttermilk, canned fruit, yeah. And
it's like nobody wants to eat their spinach. When you're a little kid, you didn't want to eat your spinach at all. You wanted the dessert. At least in my house, we did.
I learned to eat spinach later on. I love it.
Oh yeah, me too. It's an acquired taste. I actually enjoy it now. I don't mind broccoli or spinach or anything because you know that you're doing something good for your body, and so that's rewarding to me.
Yeah. Okay.
So now to the emails, and some of these emails contain some of the solutions to this. One of the first emails I got was from a Canadian woman, and she was saying that sugar, processed food, alcohol, coffee is something we need to consider. But she was saying that these bacteria are responsible for regulating the acid in our stomach. And she said she went gluten, sugar-free, and then flushed her gallbladder and liver. But she said she followed the protocol, which was apple juice during a week, fasting for a day, and then Epsom salts, grapefruit juice, and olive oil. And then she flushed these gallstones, which is a green lime color, and she said on the second day I flushed more than 100 liver stones. She said I collected all the stones, washed them, and found a parasite called fluke. She said it's a vampire, a bloodsucker. I was not absorbing anything nutritive from my food. I feel 10 years younger. My hair curls like when I was younger, and my skin's a lot better, and my energy is back. She flushed a half pound of liver stones and also found liver flukes. And she said these flukes live on rocks in your liver. They live on the liver stones produced by our bad eating habits and lifestyle. Too much sweets, too much fats, too much stress, too much estrogen. They also absorb all your minerals, your B12, and the most important, magnesium. And I got to say, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I really haven't paid much attention to dieting and nutrition. And so a lot of the stuff when people say, I mean, I'm just presenting this and people can, you know, accept or reject. I have no idea if what she's saying is true. It sounds good to me, but I'm really not an expert in this. But she said, I was looking for natural options to get rid of my evil guests, aka the flukes, because they hatch 4,000 eggs a day. She said wormwood, black walnut, cloves, garlic, ginger, neem powder. Then I looked for herbs and seeds to heal my liver to allow it to regenerate. And she found milk thistle, anise, dandelion, lemon, chamomile, mint, and the list is long. She said it's hard for a human being's ego to admit to be ruled by smaller beings, little bacteria, parasites, and fungus, but it does rule us. They are the real reptilians. Full moon, mood swing, alchemy of love, they rule. And then she took like this fibercon, this male fern extract, not the leaves, magnesium, a ton of pumpkin seeds during weeks, a lot of water, apple cider vinegar instead of coffee in the morning. She said what will make it weak is during a month is clove, turmeric, fennel, ginger, peppermint, caraway powder. She said she made her own caps, purchasing empty caps on eBay. Anyway, she says if you want to see the demon of sugar face, Google Helicobacter pylori. It grows with all the sweets your mother and grandmother, in my case, would bake for you at Christmas. She said we act, the human race, exactly like bacteria and fungus. The bacteria balance or imbalance in our guts lead our behavior. She says there's an invisible world, spirits, entities, aliens who manifest when they eat and drink alcohol or use drugs. And we have to understand what's inside us. Men grow breasts or women grow a beard with hormone imbalance. She says mental illness, cancer, aggressiveness, sex appetite, everything depends on the balance in our guts. And she says the detox is really challenging. It's a lot of pains, crazy pains. I never thought that as a mechanism of defense, parasites would secrete toxins that attack the nerves. That sounds like quite an ordeal she went through there.
Yeah, of course they do not want to go.
No, they'll go kicking and screaming.
It's cozy and warm in there.
Yeah, I took something my friend recommended called Intestinal Pro, I think it was, which were these, you know, pills. And then he suggested I take some probiotics with it, which so I got some yogurt, and I ended up getting sick. I mean, he said go ease into it, just take like one. I'm like gun ho, man. I want to get rid of these things. I took like three yogurts a day, and it's like, you know, I got sick. So I don't know, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe they were coming out, but. Here's some excerpts from this French couple in Australia that Mark Gray put me in touch with. He said, for me, the worms are the key to understand where we live and to understand as well what's the exact nature of the human body avatar we are locked in. For me, the real power hides itself in the microscopic world. And she talked a lot about neem powder. And she says, the quest has led me to something even more important, the worms and the incredible reality of this matrix. But her research, she said, I discovered that the human body and all the organic matter is bacterial in nature. Our body is 100% composed. And now this is a little controversial. This goes against what scientists are saying, and she's convinced that this is true. I have no idea one way or the other. But she said our body is 100% composed of secret polymorphic microscopic dots called microsomas or somatids that turn into bacteria when our immune system is attacked. This is the nature of the living, the polymorphism of the microdemons. And then she shows these different pictures of these, how movies, these aliens in movies look like all the different bacteria, like Salmonella, Medusa looks like that. The Kraken looked like the bacteria Helicobacter, the Leviathan, the movie in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And here's Dune, where she says that looks like another microscopic human parasite. I don't know, a couple other movies like The Arrival, and she was also mentioned the demon serpent Apep, venerated by the Egyptians, which looked like a tapeworm. And she talks about Big Pharma and Louis Pasteur's lies. She said, for Pasteur, the microscopic granulations inside the human body do not exist, and the basic unit of all organic life would be the cell. For Pasteur, the cell is clean, and any disease would come from a specific microbe coming from outside of the human body. And this allows him to become famous and Big Pharma to make substantial financial profits by inventing vaccines and antibodies. And she talks about Dr. Antoine Béchamp, he said the basic unit of all organic life is the microscopic granulation, which is much smaller than the human cell, which he calls microsoma. This granulation located inside the human body, but outside the human cell, is only visible at a magnification of at least 750. He says there's a silicium crystal inside all the microsomas that contains all our genetic information inherited or acquired. And it says the information is inscribed on the heart of the microsomas. The silicon crystal allows them to store billions of information, and they communicate with each other telepathically or by chemical reaction like ants do, and they travel and use as flying saucers the dust. A second character is Dr. Gaston Naessens, a French biologist who rediscovers the existence of microscopic granulations, and he developed a microscope to observe entities of a very small size, which he called somatids, which were the microsomas. The somatids are transformed according to the state of the immune system of a person, and they would be the smallest living entity known and the fundamental organizational element of living organisms. Which are the nanobacteria or nanobes, which they call today. They're not recognized by current medicine because to see them, it says it's absolutely necessary to use the somatoscope, the only optical instrument that grows 30,000 times the living. And the best optical microscopes only grow to 1,800 times, and electron microscopes kill the living. He says somatids live in symbiosis with humans, as reported in Star Wars for midichlorians, or the chloridians of Wilhelm Reich, who feed on orgone. But the organic matter, the microscopic granules, are polymorphic and can be transformed at the least attack into bacteria, thus into microdemons. But these attacks, more vicious and hidden, can be outside in Wi-Fi, 5G waves, chemtrails, industrial food, etc. So there's the 5G and the chemtrails and stuff. You want to mention anything at this point?
Yeah, it zaps your DNA, the 5G, and so also it is very detrimental to oxygen absorption,
right,
in general. Tomorrow I will have a video released with Lena Poo, and we talk about Wuhan,
right,
coronavirus,
sure,
and the connection to 5G.
interesting.
I think what she says makes a lot of sense, because she said that there in China you always have a lot of air pollution. I can confirm this. I've been there. Depending on what area you're in, sometimes you don't even want to step outside.
Yeah,
So,
that's pretty bad.
so that was the first thing. Then probably people not very healthy in general, maybe somewhat overworked. Then they all have to have their cell phones on them 24/7.
I'm trying to break myself of that habit myself.
Yeah. And not only are you nonstop irradiating your testicles.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, there was a woman who actually kept it inside her bra, and she
yeah,
ended up getting breast cancer as a
yeah,
result of it. And so, yeah, I'm very aware that I try to keep the cell phone at at
yeah.
least a full basketball's diameter distance away from me at all
And she
times.
also said that with men, sometimes where they wear it, they need a new hip, because the constant radiation destroys
Yeah. Wow.
the calcium in the bone.
Damn, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. So, and then on top of that, you're not really healthy. You already have a lot of respiratory problems because of air pollution, and then you switch on 5G. Yeah. So
Yeah, no telling what's going to happen there. That's a whole new world.
Now you have even more problems.
Yep.
To
Exacerbated.
breathe and to absorb oxygen. And You know, the easiest thing would be switch it off for a while and see what happens
Hmm.
with the virus. But I have a feeling that is a test run.
Hmm. It's a test run, right?
It's a test run, yeah. How fast can you run down a city of millions?
Hmm.
How
We'll
long does
find
it
out.
take?
We'll find out.
Yeah.
So she says we're dealing with a Machiavellian matrix that hides the true face of its microscopic demons, bacteria. And it takes a long time to search Google to find the real photos of bacteria. The most recent and most detailed photos taken with the most modern electron microscopes are the most difficult to find because they show the true face of bacteria, a demonic face. She says some people think that microbes or bacteria have no individuality of their own, whereas I think they're supremely intelligent and that they are the same demons and archons or controls. So she shows these two photos, and the one on top, I guess, is the one with which is the standard microscope or whatever that they use, and then the one on the bottom is the Thomascope or whatever she called it,
Up
which looks like
there.
the ones from Dune.
Can you
Hmm?
scroll up a little bit? Here.
Yeah.
What is this?
The two photos. She says there are two photos of the same bacteria. One is taken with a non-performing microscope, which is the one on top, and the other one, the most modern electron microscope. She says microscopes. The elite has a technology that is much more advanced than the one it gives to the public. So she's saying that if you get high enough resolution of these critters, you'll see that they look more like the bottom photo, which is more demonic, or I hate to use Christian terms and stuff like that, but it's kind of unscientific. And they're the ones on top, which don't look anything like the one on bottom. So
the one on the top, it reminded me of the blood samples that Lena
mm-hmm.
did. She experimented a
Mm-hmm.
lot and monitored blood samples from different
Uh-huh.
people. And she says that it needs only like 15 minutes of exposure of Wi-Fi radiation, and your
Wow.
blood starts clumping together.
Oh my God.
And after it's no longer free flowing, and after a
Mm-hmm.
day, then all the blood cells are in a chain.
Jeez.
Not only do they start clumping together, they are chained together. But what you can do is go out in the sun, ground yourself, not in the city,
Right.
but
Get away from the electronic smog and away from
in
the
nature, and get the sun,
get
because
off the grid.
yeah, the sun restructures your blood cells
Yeah.
and makes them free flowing again.
Probably wouldn't hurt to do a little meditation on it too. And
Yeah.
um, so she talks about the movie Star Wars, which is another movie about the microbiotic. And she says everyone takes George Lucas's midichlorians for the mitochondria living inside the human cell, but they're not. She says in secret, he talks about his movies about the overpowering microscopic granulations that are outside the human cell, the microsomas or somatids, and not the mitochondria. These granulations that create all the living and which hide the archons and demons. In the first episode, The Phantom Menace, the force has a material support, some strange microscopic organisms called midichlorians. And then the movies, the midichlorians are beings that are able to speak to the force, and the force manifested itself through midichlorians, allowing sensitive individuals to manipulate it. And George Lucas explains that in the next 3 Star Wars films would have explored the microbiotic world, and episodes 7 to 9 would have explained the midichlorians and the microbiotics. Says there's this world of creatures that work differently from us. I call them wills, and the wills are the ones who control the universe. They feed on the force. He goes on to explain the individuals in this distant galaxies were vehicles to transport the wills, and that the conduit is the midichlorians. The midichlorians are the ones who communicate with wills. The wills overall are the force. So I find it really interesting that George Lucas wanted to maybe get some of this information out there, maybe, and that when Disney acquired the rights, he was under the impression that they were going to do what he wanted to do and stay true to the script. But I guess he got really pissed when he found out that they didn't do anything like that. So she was saying the solutions are one of the things are the neem, which she calls the secret tree of life. And she was going to send me another document with a lot of these solutions too, but she became a victim of the fires in Australia, and she is moving, and so they're packing, and she's got no time to do any of this. So it's like there's another case where you try to get some of this information out, and you sometimes meet resistance. I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but she also mentioned pumpkin seeds, something called nanguazi, which is sweet in flavor and neutral in nature. She says it's above all a very powerful natural dewormer, which can act as well on parasites such as tapeworms, pinworms, roundworms, hookworms. And then I found this flu bomb. I'm actually on this email address of Dr. Asher. I think you know Dr. Asher, right?
Yes, of course.
I found this in one of his emails, this flu bomb recipe, which I better include the one's name, Candace Center, because she's copyrighted it. But it's 1 whole lemon, a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne powder, one minced clove of garlic, 2 teaspoons raw organic honey, 1 tablespoon of grated ginger, 1/2 tablespoon of turmeric powder, and 1 cup of echinacea tea. And then the instructions are brew 1 cup of the echinacea tea, squeeze the lemon juice into the cup, add the remaining ingredients, stir, and then drink. I got another email from this man who had an etheric spider implant in his neck. So, you know, there's more than just the physical parasites. There's also these astral parasites or etheric ones. And he believes he has one in his neck, and that's a jellyfish implant creature that he's seen the astral ones, which don't carry a shape, but they are astral jellyfish. And most healers can see it. He sees it in his third eye, but he says it seems to be more of a technology weapon from a different source, and he thinks he's a targeted individual. He says they cause him heavy spiritual dissociation, like no memories, no thoughts, no emotions, not grounded. He says it's connected to his brain and nervous system, and it depletes him of his energy. He says it looks like a colorless plasma blob with tentacles, and his blood flow, energy flow, everything inside his body is blocked. He's tried to go to different healers, and he's had not a lot of success in doing that. He's convinced it's an implant, it's a physical implant. So I try to put him in touch with Dr. Roger Lear, and they've actually removed a bunch of alien implants for what it's worth. I don't know if I haven't heard back from him on that. Another email was from an anonymous emailer that I know, and he's tried this ashwagandha, which gives him lucid dreams, but he uses herbs such as turmeric, oat straw, ashwagandha, jalapenos, kefir, ginger, honey, lemon tea to fight off allergies and related brain fog. But the antibacterial gel tabs and the acidophilus gel tabs appear to really attack the parasites best. He says he feels a little tummy ache from the ginger tea, so he's going to hold back on that and drink coffee, take a few tablespoons of magnesium citrate, and drink lots of water. He says he's going to get a HEPA filter to get rid of the spores and mold in his room. He says the AC heater filter could go a long way to overall health improvement, and maybe even chemtrail metals and other toxins. He said he thought he was being attacked by bed bugs, and he realized it wasn't, but parasites under his skin. So he took an anti-parasite pill and an acidophilus pill, took some diced ginger tea with a bit of lemon and honey, and he wonders if the combination of the anti-parasite pill and ginger really gets them screaming to get out. My friend Nadia sent me a link to an article listing the 12 best essential oils for parasite. She said, I used oregano oil to clear mine. She said, I'm with them on ginger, cinnamon, and chamomile, but most of the others are nasty tasting. But he says that we probably need to learn to accept the bitter and sour tastes, more and more, instead of the sugar tastes, which are more pleasing to us.
If you do something for your liver, bitter is the way to go.
Yeah, seems to be.
Foods that are bitter, vegetables.
Seems like everything that we love and enjoy and seems to be bad for us, and everything that seems bitter and bad is the best for it. Everything's upside down, inside out. But
I don't eat a lot of sugar, if any.
Good for you.
Mm.
I've cut way back on that. So he says he thinks the Toxoplasma gondii may be the primary parasite that is the root cause for triggering schizophrenia, the voices in our head. He thinks targeted individuals might be controlled through the voices, and he's been fighting these voices most of his life. He says the reward and punishment aspect of the ARC virus may very well be the negative voices I hear in my head. I can't help but believe these viruses or parasites could be what is being programmed into us by the off-worlders. The chips found in some targeted individuals may amplify the signal, he wonders. He says these off-worlders control most every person this way in much the same way. He says they can't read your mind, but if they can subtly manipulate your impulses. He says we are more or less owned by off-worlders, and these off-worlders can control our diet. If they can control our diet, then they control us with sugary drinks, pasta, and bread. If more subtle, simple gut parasite and harmful gut bacteria sugar cravings don't work to manipulate us, then they use verbal voice commands through brain parasites, such as intuition, to control us. But he goes on, and he's getting off sugars and glutens, and here he goes. He says, we may have to learn to eat and drink sour and bitter things, which I agree with. Knowing the craving demands are pure manipulation. It's difficult to know what is programmed into my DNA or piped into my mind and gut through parasites. I think it's at least worth a look into discovering what life could be without being a slave to cravings. He said, but if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And he started using herbs, flowers, and other natural materials, and he's been adding to his teas and vinegary drinks and ginger tea, other herbs and other plant matter may have reduced his brain fog. He's noticed a lot of reducement in that area. And then this was the one I got from this woman like 4 years ago before I wrote this article, and it just didn't connect to me. Maybe I was in a hurry, I had other stuff on my mind, I read it, and it just didn't really hit me. But she's a targeted individual, and she says she's parasite bug implanted. These worm-like creatures are a sure sign of parasitic invasion within a host. She was referencing some of the NDEs that mentioned worms. There's really not that many. There's only one or two that I found, but there are a bunch of alien ones. She said that she's done a lot of research, and you can visit your local health shop and get an herbal remedy for doing a parasite cleanse. She uses one called Paracea Forte in Australia. She said other supplements you can take include selenium and digestive enzymes. She does a water fast every few months and avoids sugar and dairy as much as possible. And then she found this product called Food by Plant Fusion, a completely plant-based meal replacement which you can practically live on, which would be easier than a water fast. She takes a health tonic, freshly squeezed lemon juice, a tiny sprinkle of habanero pepper, and a few drops of oil or oregano in the morning. She bought an ozonator and drinks ozonated water every day. Then she talks about them. She wears a basic zapper, and then she says the best thing in your arsenal is food grade diatomaceous earth, and she said it removes all the heavy metals, toxins, and pathogens. I bought some food, and I've bought the PHOOD is how it's spelled, and used it. But I found an even better one, which has. I did a search on like the nutrients that vegans don't get in their diet and they should take as supplements, and they listed like 7 of them, and I found one that contains all 7 of them, and if you take 2 servings every day, you're going to get 100% of all of it. And let's see, it's called what is it called? I can't remember it now, shoot, but it's like vegan all-in-one. It's by Naturaid, and so I just ordered it, and it looks pretty good, but it has like 5 to 6 grams of sugar per serving, but I found like an average banana contains 14 grams of sugar. I don't think 5 or 6 grams of sugar is going to be too terribly much. I'd rather have none, which food has like less than 1 gram. But
yeah, although I think that your body processes the sugar of a banana differently than the one that is coming out of the sugar box. You know what I mean?
Probably. It's more natural. So then this feedback from Arwayne Steiger's show, I think I mentioned about the guy that did a parasite cleanse, but I asked him what he did when his cleansing. He said he did a number of things: aloe vera juice, Rick Simpson oil, which is pure terpenes, coffee enemas, diatomaceous earth, cayenne pepper tincture, pure turpentine. He says he can't remember if there's more. He says he only uses herbs for medicine and home cooking and prepare all meals. So, you start seeing more than one person mentioning the same thing. You can kind of think that that's maybe a pretty good solution there, or something to try. At least that's the way I kind of look at it. And then I go through the section of Hollywood and some of the movies. E.T., that looks like a worm to me. Star Wars, which we mentioned, talks about the midichlorians. This dialogue from it says, "Master Sir, I heard Yoda talking about midichlorians. I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?" He answers, "Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells. They live inside me, inside your cells, yes, and we are symbionts with them." Symbionts? Life forms living together for mutual advantage. Without the midichlorians, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the Force. They continually speak to us, telling us of the will of the Force. When you learn to quiet your mind, you'll hear them speaking to you. And then the movie Dune has these giant sandworms that harvest the spice. And interestingly, the enemy are called the Archaeon, which sounds an awful lot like Archon. Of course, there's the movie Alien, where the worm parasite kind of comes out of her stomach. You've got The Wrath of Khan, Prometheus, Stargate SG-1, The Hobbit, Tremor, Star Trek: The Next Generation, episode called The Host. Even in The Matrix, which you mentioned, there were the Sentinels. And then in the movie The Wall, the lead singer wants to stop the show. He's put in a prison cell and placed on trial, which is presided over by a worm known as Worm Your Honor. And in the song Waiting for the Worms, he is urged to follow the worms. You've got this rock band, modern rock band called Tool, and their song and video called Vicarious. And the lyrics say, "Vicariously I live while the whole world dies." And the video shows these worms and ticks and leeches that are inside his body. And the video was actually produced with the help of Alex Gray, who's really famous in the new, I guess you call him the New Age community, whereas his artwork is influenced by his DMT experiences. So he collaborated with him to produce that video. And then you've got the Edgar Allan Poe poem, "The Conqueror Worm," where he talks about they're sitting in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears, and mimes in the form of God on high, they mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly, mere puppets, they come and go at bidding of vast formless things, invisible. He says that motley drama, we should not forget it, with its phantom chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not, through a circle that ever returneth into the self same spot, and much the madness and more of sin and horror the soul of the plot. But see, amid the mimic rout, a crawling shape intrude, a blood-red thing that writhes from out. It rise with mortal pangs. The mimes become its food, and seraphs sob at vermin fangs and human gore imbued. Out are the lights, out all, and over each quivering form, the curtain, a funeral pall, while the angels, all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy man, and its hero, the conqueror worm. I don't know where I ran across that, but I found it very interesting. And then in near-death experiences, I've found like 2 or 3 dozen that talk about aliens. There was only one that I remember that talked about worms, but James M. said, "I was taken to see a worm working controls of big cylinders that had every animal and peoples you could think of, and they were going down the cylinders from adults to babies. Fish also, I remember seeing all kinds of fish. As I was walking towards the worm, I heard a voice say, 'You go back and be a better man.' I was told by many the light was the creator God, and the worm was an angel giving rebirth." So that's pretty much the article right there. And then I wonder if these Archons don't control us through the viruses and bacteria and stuff that's inside of us. And, they say that these viruses are driving our evolution, and so maybe, are they helping us or are they controlling us? I mentioned that in bold, and I can't help but think that they're hurting us. I don't think they're helping us in any way. and I wonder if the DNA instructions don't contain the script that for us that we're kind of follow when we come down here, but that these worms and viruses and stuff can hack in and change that script. And but they're necessary for the whole struggle that we have. You need a villain if you're going to have a drama or a play in which there's conflict and drama, and to make it interesting, and so that we can overcome and become the heroes. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I would say to get rid of these parasites, and it doesn't matter where, on your skin, in your gut.
Yeah.
Yes, a very strict regimen has to be performed while you're
It's crazy.
doing that. Yeah.
I mean, from the moment you wake up, you roll out of bed, and you have to, everybody does, but I mean, if you're going to work, you go directly to the shower, right? And you have to wash off all these damn germs and parasites, and then you go and you brush your teeth, and then, you go to the bathroom and expel all that stuff, and you're constantly cleaning and dusting, and it's just a never ending. And then you have to watch your diet too, which I never really did before, but I'm going to have to now. And
but once you have done that, be balanced. You know what I mean? Because if you can become neurotic, if you're,
yes,
I don't do this, I don't do that, and then you have no more fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want a plate of pasta or pizza once in a while, that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Have fun. But
yeah, you can have these pH strips or whatever, or the meter, and just every once in a while check and make sure you're not too acidic. You just don't pig out every day on brownies and cakes and stuff. And I went most of my whole life not worrying about what I eat, and I'm relatively healthy and strong. I think it's only when you start to get older that you're nearing the end of your life cycle that you have to be a little more concerned, because I think the immune system starts to wear down at some point, and it's just not able to fight them off, and it's just a relentless attack on us.
You know what I was thinking, what really disturbed me when I said about consciousness, and that we share 70% of our DNA with a slimy worm. So, we have this general stance that humanity is a cancer to Earth. And
yeah, that's what the Matrix said. Yeah,
it's so horrible. Yeah, better you cut your throat right away. It would be better for the planet. So, and these articles, in my view, they cater to that.
Yeah.
Because they are telling you, you know what, actually, you're just a walking, talking worm.
Yes, but they also say that it's a symbiotic relationship. I mean, I probably tended to focus more on the negative side of it and didn't emphasize most of the parts that said that it's all symbiosis, and that it's co-evolving with them together, and that they're actually driving our evolution, and that they're shaping us. So, I mean, almost from some of their perspective, they're saying that they're beneficial to us, and we do have friendly bacteria inside of us too. And so, maybe I tended to focus a little too much on the negative in the article.
Yeah, it has, to me, I'm very sensitive about that.
Yeah.
If people try to, hold us down and tell us that we are not good enough. We are just walking, talking monkeys, and you know what I mean, yeah.
From a physical standpoint, the bodies that we are in may have come from that past, but I mean, there's a spirit that is placed inside of it that has nothing to do with any of that, and it's immortal, and it's eternal, and it's divine. And so, I mean, I was focusing almost exclusively on the physical in this article, which I didn't really like. I mean, that's why I avoided writing this thing for a couple of years. It's not really stuff I don't like getting into, the negative, slimy, physical part of it, because I tend to focus more on the spirit, and I think that's more important. But I felt like this article did need to be written.
Yeah,
and maybe
but
we should add a little more part about how we are spirit, foremost. Give it more balance.
Are you finished? Can you
Yeah.
the screen share?
Oh, sure. Hold on a second. Here we go.
There you are.
I have a face for radio.
3D Archons, for sure.
We can what? We are what?
3D Archons.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And not only in the realm of bacteria and viruses, sometimes in the realm of humans as well. Yeah. Either they feed off of your energy, or
Well, this and literally in this, according to this article, I mean, these parasites and viruses and all that, I mean, they literally are feeding off our energy, and that's what they're saying. So I thought, I had been talking so much about Archons feeding off of us, whether they're shadow beings, they're like mental parasites and energy parasites. I was thinking a bit more from a mental and astral and a spiritual standpoint, but here it goes all the way even down to the physical, perhaps.
Yeah, it's definitely a battle that is fought on multiple fronts.
It's a what? On multiple fronts?
A battle that is fought on multiple fronts.
Oh, a battle. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. It's just many, many different layers and levels to the whole thing. And it's a game, and you have to be prepared to play the game, I guess. And it's not an easy one, that's for sure.
Yeah, but while you are playing, have fun.
Yeah. Like you said, you got to have balance. And I think sometimes I wonder, if myself and some of us that are into this conspiracy stuff, if maybe we're the ones that don't know how to have fun in life. I mean, I know for me, I'm only speaking personally. To me, life isn't super fun, and maybe it's because I'm quote unquote a loser. I didn't get the job. I wasn't able to be a rock star. I wasn't able to get the girl I wanted. I wasn't able to do the things I really wanted. And so maybe it's a loser mentality. There are people out there that are just having fun with life, and they know how to have fun, and they like you say, they don't take it so seriously. Whereas maybe I just don't know how to do that. But for that reason, though, I don't really want to come back here. I mean, I'm not totally against taking a form in some dimension or some universe, but I don't particularly like this one, where it's seemingly we don't have complete total free will, choosing your body, choosing your talents, choosing things that happen to you.
You're done with this inverted quadrant here? No more?
I'm done. I'm done with Earth. My friend who had a near-death experience, he kind of goes back and forth between going back to the light and requesting a better world. He says that this one is 2/3 light, and that you can either stop reincarnating until the new he sees like a new Earth that's much better than this. It's almost paradise. He says you can stop reincarnating till then, or you can request a better world to go to. But then sometimes he says that he's going to just set an intention in the void and ask questions before he makes decisions. So he kind of goes back and forth. And then there's, I've read a bunch. I did the article on the so-called void, and there's 2 or 3 dozen people that were just talking about how the so-called void is just it's peaceful and almost blissful, and I don't know. But if you like the drama and you like to play games, it seems like we're on a never-ending quest. It's the never-ending story to have new experiences and new adventures, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm kind of tired with this adventure here. It's not one of the more fun ones, I don't think. Maybe we were dared to do it once, and we're like, yeah, okay, I'll try that one time.
Yeah, and another thing is you have to be in love with this game. Then you can really play, and then it gets easier. But until you jumped over that hurdle, it's really draining and exhausting.
Yeah, attitude is so important. It's all perception. And there's people, if you take a negative, pessimistic viewpoint,
Mm.
you're not going to have any fun. It's going to be hell on earth, but it's not everything on earth is suffering or pain. I mean, maybe for some, but I try to take the positive, and I do things that I enjoy. I mean, I've got guitars and pianos. I try to explore my creative side, and I'll watch some stuff every once in a while on TV, which is like entertainment shows, variety shows. So I do find some joy in life. I go out for walks in nature and talk to people, but it's for most of my life. People haven't want to have anything to do with me. It's like women find me invisible. They don't have anything to do with me. Even guy, I mean, I got like one or two guy friends. I mean, just nobody wants to do anything with me. And the older I get, it's just the more I run into that. It's like nobody wants to have anything to do with you, at least with me. And so that's how much fun can you have? You kind of, I don't know, you get into a shell.
Yeah, maybe this life you were not meant.
No, I think that I'm meant to. This is my last time here, and I'm going to go on. And so, maybe my goal is to wake other people up. And so, to do this research, I can't be distracted by a wife and family and a bunch of friends and being a rock star. I gotta focus on all this. So, and that's a positive, healthy perspective to take. I don't know if it's true, but who knows?
Yeah, but even if it's not true, whining about it doesn't help either.
That's exactly right. Absolutely right.
So I think you're very good at what you're doing now. So keep
Thank
doing
you.
it.
I will keep trying. I will do it until nobody. There's only like maybe 3 interviewers out there that ever want to have me on. That ever ask me back. There's like thousands of interviewers, and there's like maybe 10 that have wanted it. And then it's the same thing with people that read the articles. I think I found that maybe 1% of the people that visit the site, will stay on it for an hour or more. Anything like 80% of them, they're done in less than 30 seconds. And that's understandable. People are looking for a certain piece of information when they search, and they didn't find it. And so they go on. But then another only 10% maybe spend 5 to 15 minutes. But when you start getting down to like an hour or more, which I would think if I just stumbled onto this, I'm really interested in it, I'm going to spend an hour or more reading different art. Only like 1% are even interested in that. And then you do an interview like this, and there's like maybe 3,000 people that watch it, and then you get like 3 emails. Like 1 in 1,000 people are interested enough to either it's just the way it is. And
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I keep on going.
And
If
the
nobody's
attention
interested, so
span
be
in
it.
general is not the best right now.
What's that?
The attention span in general is not the best
No,
right
it's
now.
not. It's not. People are so much interested in other things. They want to have fun. Like the song "Girls Just Want to Have Fun." People are here to have a good time. They don't want to. It's only when you maybe get a little older. I've noticed in some of my surveys, most of the people that take the surveys are in their 50s. So very rarely do I get anybody that takes a survey that's in their 20s or something. They're just too busy out there having fun. Watching Netflix, whatever it is they do. So being on Facebook and Instagram. So
Yeah, but all these social media companies, it's also a curse.
yeah, I know. So I put this information out there. I find it interesting and it's important to me. So I figured if I'm going to take the time to do all this, I'll share it with other people. And maybe that 1% of the people out there will find it relevant and helpful. And so it's for them that I do it. And it is a lot of work.
Yeah,
But
and another thing is, I mean, let's be honest, whenever you find something or you research something, yes, you put it out there, but you yourself, you are learning as well.
oh yeah, when I do a show like this or the one I did last week with our Arwayne Steiger, and I never know where the interview is going to go, what they want to talk about. So with the Arwayne Steiger, I literally was like reading the article over and over and over and trying to memorize in case I just had to give a off the cuff summary of it, which I did. But yeah, I learned. I commit it to memory, and the most important thing is. Every once in a while, I get a really good email from somebody who had a profound experience or they share with me something that I did not know, and it takes my research in a whole new direction. I mean, that's very rare, but without me putting myself out there and giving my email and asking for input and feedback, whether negative or positive, without that, I might not know what I know today. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, thank you very much for coming. Interesting article, even though I had some reservations.
Well, that's fine. I do too. I don't know how much of it to believe either. I mean, these are materials; they are scientists, and like you said, I mean, just because 70% of the genome can be traced to viruses and stuff. Like you said, 98% can be, we share in common with bananas or plants or monkeys. I mean, none of it means it's not definitive proof. So, but I found it interesting enough to put out there.
I'm not surprised that all life forms share a lot of genome here.
Right.
It's in the end, it's the same planet.
Yeah, and then when I was going to write an article about parasites and bacteria and stuff, I mean, let's face it, I'm in the realm of science there, so I kind of have to use, if I want any kind of credibility, I kind of felt like I needed to rely on, and it was there. I mean, I looked at the scientific information, and it's like, whoa, they are talking how we evolved from, I mean, it was, to me, that's significant enough. I at least got to put the article out there. I mean, the scientists are saying we evolved and came from worms. It's like, whoa, that's what I'm writing about. I should include that, So I don't know if it's true or not, but it's for sure, it's interesting. And
so wonderful. This was it, Night Flight for today.
Yeah.
Everybody take good care of yourself. Stay safe and sound. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.